The morning had started quietly, almost deceptively so. A faint breeze pushed through the curtains, carrying the smell of cut grass from a neighbor's yard. The shirt I had ironed the night before still hung on the back of the chair, the faint shine of pressed cotton waiting for me to step into it. Today was the day I had promised myself would be different. Today was the day I would finally meet the man my daughter had chosen. I had rehearsed the moment in my head more times than I cared to admit. The handshake, the careful but measured smile, the way I'd look him in the eye just long enough to let him know I was still her father, but not so long that it turned into a challenge. Fathers live in that balance, between welcoming and warning. The clock in the hall read 10 minutes past 1. I was running early on purpose. I didn't want to walk into the restaurant flustered, or worse, late. First impressions are not for the young alone. They're for fathers, too. I picked up my keys from the counter and slid them into my jacket pocket. My daughter had texted me earlier. "He's nervous, Dad," but in a good way. I had stared at that message longer than I should have. Nervous in a good way. That meant he cared what I thought. It meant he understood what this meeting was. I slipped my shoes on and walked toward the door, already rehearsing the words I would say when I saw them together. That was when the knock came. It wasn't hurried, it wasn't polite, it was steady, deliberate, 3 sharp strikes that echoed through the hallway and pulled me up short. I opened the door to find a man standing on the step. Dark suit, plain tie, a badge glinting faintly from inside his coat. His face carried no smile, no warmth, just a flat seriousness that immediately hollowed out my chest. "Mr. Ward?" he asked. "Yes." He reached into his coat, producing a leather folder, and flipped it open just enough for me to see the badge again. "Detective Lennox," he said. His tone was measured, as though every word had been weighed before it left his mouth. "I need a moment of your time." I hesitated, glancing at the keys in my hand. "I'm on my way to meet my daughter," I said. "That's exactly why I'm here." The words didn't make sense at first. My brows drew together as I tried to read his expression. He wasn't asking for help with an investigation. He wasn't here to deliver bad news from a distance. He had come for me specifically, and it had something to do with my daughter. "What is this about?" I asked. He looked past me into the house, then back at me. "It's better if we sit down." Something in the way he said it pulled the strength from my chest. I stepped aside without another word, letting him into the hallway. We sat at the table we used to crowd with birthday cakes and maps for summer drives. He set the phone down between us, but kept his fingers at the edges, as if phones could run. "3 things before you watch," he said. "This was recorded under warrant. The audio is harder to hear than the picture, so I'll fill in where it drops out. And the man on the screen uses a different name than the one your daughter knows." The room seemed to find a new shape around that sentence. He tapped the screen. At first, a rental's living room, gray couch, cheap art, a floor lamp with a crooked shade. The camera sat high, angled into the corner. A table carried the quiet clutter of a hurried meal. Plastic container, a pair of chopsticks, a paper napkin folded into a square too neat to be accidental. The door opened. A man stepped in, checked the hallway behind him, then shut the door with a soft, practiced pull. I didn't recognize him immediately. He had the kind of face that looks different every time the light changes. Handsome in one angle, forgettable in another. He wore a dark coat, despite the warmth I'd felt outside. The collar up, a habit more than a need. He tossed a key on the table. It spun once and stopped like a compass, finding north. "Watch his hands," Lennox said. The man pulled a phone from his pocket, another from the inside of his coat, and laid them side by side. He powered one on, the other off. Then he took a thin case from his wallet and slid out a small bright thing that caught the ceiling light. SIM card, even I could tell that much. He swapped it with the care of a dentist. When he finished, he sat and exhaled as if a task had been completed rather than a day. The front door opened again. A second figure came in, hood up, shoulders squared against more than weather. The hood fell back. A woman, mid-40s, hair tied in a knot that didn't want to be there. She took the chair opposite him, her back to the camera. I leaned closer to the screen without meaning to. They didn't touch. They didn't smile. The man, his profile now clean in the light, pushed the powered-on phone toward her. She hesitated, then took it. The audio wavered, a thin scrape of words. I could make out pieces. Two-step, he leaves it. Don't rush. Your father, cautious. The woman's hand tightened on the phone. She wasn't my daughter. I knew that from the line of her neck, from the shape of her jaw. But there was a resemblance that rose and fell with the light, like seeing a family name inside a different signature. My stomach cooled. The detective didn't speak. He let the picture finish what the sound could not. The man leaned forward, forearms on knees. You said he keeps important papers at home, he said. Clearer now, the microphone deciding to agree. Closet safe. Anniversary code. Still true? Unless he changed it. Her voice was low, worn. He doesn't like changing things? Lennox's eyes flicked to me, then back to the screen. He didn't ask who else that description might fit. Anniversary? The man asked. May 21st, she said. He kept the ring after we... The end of the sentence got lost in the rasp of the air conditioning. She smoothed the napkin on the table like it had said something unkind. The man nodded once, the way people do when a plan gets a piece it was missing. Good, he said. We don't need much. The rest we can do after. The woman's head tipped just enough to suggest a question. After? After the introductions, he said, and smiled a small, polished smile that never reached his eyes. After we're in the family. I felt the chair under me and the table under my palm and the sense, a carpenter's sense, that the room had shifted a fraction out of square. Lennox paused the video. The man on the screen froze mid-smile. You'll want names, he said. Your daughter knows him as Daniel Pierce. DMV and payroll records say Daniel doesn't exist. The man you're watching has used 3 names we can prove in the last 6 years. The one that tracks best is Aaron Pike. Aaron, I repeated, like testing a tool to see where it catches. And the woman? The detective's gaze held mine for a moment longer than comfort. Your ex-wife, he said quietly. She met him twice that we can verify. Both times off the books, both through an account we believe he controls. The house went quiet in that way houses sometimes do. The refrigerator motor choosing that second to stop, the clock choosing that second to breathe between ticks. Somewhere deep in the wall, a pipe shifted and sighed. She told him about the safe, I said. She told him about you, he answered. He restarted the video. The man, Aaron, sat back, folded his hands. The woman leaned in, elbows on the table. The microphone liked the change. She's not stupid, the woman said. If she finds out we spoke, she won't, Aaron said, because you won't tell her, and I have no reason to. I'm not your enemy. A tired smile ghosted across the woman's face. You're nobody's enemy if they're useful. He didn't answer that. Instead, he's protective of her? Yes. Good. It plays better if a father pushes, you don't know him. I don't need to, he said. I just need the shape of the room he thinks he's walking into. A phone buzzed on the table, hers from the way she flinched. She glanced at the screen and then slid it aside, face down. She texted me, she said. 2:00 at Mariani's. Aaron's eyes warmed, or did an impression of warmth. Perfect, he said softly. We'll be toasting by 4. Just don't humiliate her. He looked down at his hands. I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm here to build something that lasts. On a lie. On a story, he said. Stories hold longer than facts when people are lonely. The detective stopped the video again, thumb on the glass. He let that last line hang until it stopped being a line and became a weight. Then he locked the phone and slid it to the center of the table. He didn't speak until I looked up. "You asked what this is about," he said. "It's about a pattern. He finds families with money organized in a certain way. He makes himself necessary. He marries into the center and moves the edges where he can reach them. Sometimes it's a trust. Sometimes it's property. Sometimes it's access to the person who decides access for everyone else." My voice came out careful, like stepping on ice. "You're saying he wants my daughter for what she leads to." "I'm saying he wants your daughter," he said, "and also what your daughter leads to." The room had narrowed. Driving to lunch seemed like an idea left over from someone else's morning. I looked at the hall where her graduation photographs hung. Caps, awkward grins, the sort of pride that sits forever behind glass. I thought about the anniversary code, about a habit I hadn't bothered to break because it felt like respect. "What do you need from me?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He took a small notebook from his inner pocket, flipped it open, read a line or two the way some men glance at a compass before naming a direction. Then he met my eyes again. "I need you to go to that lunch," he said. On time. Calm. "I need you to let him believe the room has the shape he gave it. And I need you not to tell your daughter yet." "Yet," I repeated. The word didn't fit in my mouth. "If we spook him, he'll pivot," Lennox said. "He's good at changing masks without changing rooms. But he's also proud. Pride is a bridge. People like him walk too far out on it if you let them. Why bring this to me at all? Why not stop him now?" "We don't have enough to hold," he said. "We have enough to watch, enough to catch him shaping the story the way he always does. With you there, he'll try harder. He'll need to impress you. He'll make mistakes." "And my daughter?" His jaw worked once, a muscle ticking along the line of his cheek. "I'll have eyes on the restaurant," he said. "So will my partner. If he tries to steer her somewhere private afterward, we'll intercept. I won't let him be alone with her today." I nodded slowly, though nothing in me felt like motion. The clock in the hall marked another minute. He checked his watch, then the time on the locked phone, as if agreeing with different versions of the morning. "One more thing," he said, and his voice lost its measured quality for the first time. "If he brings up your ex-wife, don't bite. Don't defend. Don't condemn. He's looking for a weak joist. Let it stay quiet." I stood and found my balance like a man stepping onto a boat. I reached for my keys on the table and thought of the safe I hadn't changed, of the ring I kept in its velvet. I thought of my daughter at a window in a dress she'd chosen twice, once for how it looked, and once for how it felt to be seen in it. At the door, he stopped beside me. Up close, he smelled faintly of laundry soap and cold air. "Mr. Ward," he said, "you've prepared all morning to be a father in one way. I'm asking you to be a father in another. Let me worry about the law. You keep the room steady." I held the handle. The wood was warm from the sun. Outside, the street had the fragile calm of early afternoon. Somewhere a mower started, stopped, then started again, like a thought someone couldn't finish. I locked the door behind us. He didn't look back at the house. Neither did I. The drive to the restaurant felt longer than it should have, even though the roads were nearly empty. My hands rested on the wheel, steady enough to pass for calm, but every turn of the tires carried the echo of that video. The image of him, Aaron, Daniel, whatever name he carried, sitting across from my daughter's mother, speaking with a confidence that did not belong to a stranger, replayed in my head until the lines of the road blurred. Detective Lennox's car followed 2 lengths behind, far enough not to spook, close enough to remind me I was not alone in this. Still, it didn't feel like protection. It felt like a shadow that knew more than I did. Mariani's was a brick building with green awnings and the kind of front windows that turned daylight into amber. I had been there before, years earlier, when my daughter was still in school, and we would celebrate small victories. An exam passed, a birthday dinner, the day she got her driver's license. Walking into that place had always been a comfort. Now it looked like a stage. I parked, cut the engine, and sat for a moment. Across the lot, a dark sedan idled, its windows reflecting the sun. Lennox's partner, maybe? Watching? Waiting? Through the glass of the restaurant, I saw her, my daughter, already seated near the back. She waved when our eyes met, a smile breaking across her face with the same brightness she'd had as a child. Beside her sat a man I recognized from the video. The same mouth, the same posture. But here, in daylight, in pressed clothes and polished shoes, he looked every inch the fiancé she believed him to be. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The scent of garlic and wine hung in the air, carried by the low murmur of conversations. A waiter glanced at me, then toward my daughter's table, and guided me forward. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the floorboards had taken on water. "Dad," she said, standing as I approached. She wrapped her arms around me, warm and real, the kind of hug that makes you forget the weight for a fraction of a second. I held on to it a little longer than usual. When we sat, my eyes went to him. He rose halfway, extended a hand across the table, smile practiced but not insincere. "Mr. Ward," he said, "it's an honor to finally meet you. I'm Daniel." The name lodged in my chest. Daniel, the one she knew, not Aaron, not the man in that dim rental room with my ex-wife, but the same face, the same voice. His grip was firm, confident, not overbearing, the kind of handshake designed to win fathers over. "Daniel," I said, returning the shake. My voice didn't betray me. At least I hoped it didn't. We sat, menus already laid out in front of us, though none of us reached for them. My daughter's eyes sparkled as she looked between us. "I've been waiting for this," she said, "for the two of you to finally meet." He smiled at her, then at me, as if nothing in his life carried weight, heavier than this moment of introductions. "She talks about you all the time," he said. "I feel like I already know you." I watched him closely, waiting for some flicker, some tell that the detective's warnings weren't shadows, but solid truths. Yet what I saw was a man playing his part to perfection. The waiter arrived with water and breadsticks, reciting the specials with a memorized rhythm. My daughter leaned against her chair, listening only halfway. She was focused on me, on him, on the space between us. I nodded at the menu, but barely heard a word. When the waiter left, she clasped her hands together on the table. "So," she said brightly, "what do you think?" Her question was aimed at me, but her eyes darted to him, soft with hope. I had seen that look before. The look she used to give me when she brought home a test she had studied weeks for, waiting for me to acknowledge her effort. Now she was older, stronger, but the need for approval still lived in her expression. "I think," I said slowly, "that it's good to finally sit at the same table." She relaxed, satisfied with the neutrality of my words. Daniel, Aaron, leaned forward, his elbows almost touching the wood. "I've been looking forward to this," he said, "meeting the family. It means a lot to me, to us." He reached for her hand. She gave it willingly. Their fingers interlocked, and I felt the tension at the back of my neck tighten another turn. "Tell me about yourself," I said, "where you're from, what you do." He smiled, not nervously, but as if he had rehearsed the exact moment. "Born and raised out west. My father was in construction. My mother taught high school English. I studied finance, but I've always been more interested in the way people live than the way numbers line up. Lately, I've been consulting, helping families plan, invest, secure their future. The words hung there, carefully chosen, polished, smooth. Families. Invest. Secure their future. They sounded innocuous enough for her ears, but to mine, sharpened by Lennox's warning, they carried edges. My daughter's eyes lit up. He's being modest. He's amazing at what he does. He's helped friends of mine get their budgets in order, start saving, even invest a little. He's just really smart about these things. Daniel gave a gentle shrug, the picture of humility. I like helping people find stability. That's all. I nodded slowly, studying the curve of his smile and the weight of his pauses. He didn't seem rattled. He seemed comfortable, as though he knew exactly how much to give, how much to withhold. The waiter returned, took our orders, and left again. The small talk that followed, about the weather, the neighborhood, a new Italian place that had opened across town, was a thin covering stretched over the real current flowing beneath the table. When the plates arrived, Daniel raised his glass. To family, he said. His eyes lingered on me longer than they should have, and to new beginnings. I touched my glass to theirs, the sound sharp and delicate in the quiet. As we ate, he asked me questions about my work, about where I had grown up, about my hobbies. They were polite, respectful, almost too polished. He listened with just enough intensity to seem sincere, yet there was something in the way he filed each answer away, as if every word I gave him was a tool he might use later. At one point, when my daughter excused herself to the restroom, he leaned slightly closer. His voice lowered, not much, but enough for me to notice the shift. She means the world to me, he said. I want you to know that. I plan to take care of her, protect her, give her everything she deserves. I kept my expression still. That's what every father wants to hear. His smile deepened. Then I'm glad we understand each other. For the briefest second, his eyes cooled, just a flicker, a shadow that came and went before my daughter returned to the table. When she sat, the warmth returned, and he picked up the thread of conversation as though nothing had happened. The rest of the meal passed in fragments, words strung together that should have belonged to an ordinary afternoon. My daughter laughed easily, filling the spaces between courses with stories from work, friends, and little details about the apartment she and Daniel were considering. She painted pictures with her hands, animated, alive. He nodded in all the right places, adding comments that made her smile. But every so often his eyes cut back to me, measuring. Not hostile, not even openly challenging, but watching the way a man studies a blueprint, memorizing the load-bearing walls. When dessert menus appeared, my daughter shook her head, laughing at the waiter. If I eat another bite, you'll have to roll me out of here. She leaned back, content. Daniel waved the waiter away with practiced ease, then folded his hands on the table. So, he said, his tone light but deliberate, I know we're still early in this journey, but I wanted to ask for your blessing. I want you to know my intentions are serious. I plan to marry your daughter. The air shifted. My daughter's eyes widened. Her face flushed with a mixture of joy and surprise. She glanced at me, almost shyly, as if she were 13 again and asking permission to go out with friends. I let the silence stretch for a moment, long enough that both of them leaned forward slightly, waiting. I could feel Lennox's warning replaying in my head. Let him believe the room has the shape he gave it. I set my fork down carefully. Marriage is a big step, I said. It's not just about feelings. It's about trust, stability, building something that lasts. I'd want to know you're ready for that. Daniel nodded, almost eagerly. I am. I've thought a lot about this. I've made mistakes in the past, like anyone, but I've learned from them. What matters now is her. U.S.? Our future? He looked at her, and for a moment even I couldn't tell if the affection in his eyes was real or manufactured. My daughter squeezed his hand, her expression soft, trusting. I love him, Dad, she said simply. The words cut through everything else. There it was, the truth I couldn't fight without tearing her world apart. I drew a slow breath. Then we'll take it one step at a time, I said. I'll need to know you better. But for today, let's call it a beginning. Relief washed over her face. Daniel's smile widened, confident. He raised his glass again. To beginnings, he said once more, voice smooth as silk. We left the restaurant an hour later. Outside, the sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lot. Daniel walked her to the car, opened the door for her, then turned to me. Thank you, he said, for today. It means more than you know. His gaze held mine a moment too long. Behind him, across the street, I caught sight of Lennox, leaning against a lamppost, arms crossed, watching without watching. Daniel followed my eyes just briefly, and in that instant I saw the faintest tightening of his jaw, a flash of recognition or suspicion. He masked it quickly, but it was there. He slipped into the driver's seat beside my daughter, waved once through the windshield, and pulled out of the lot. Lennox walked over slowly, hands in his pockets. You handled that well, he said. I turned toward him, my voice low. He asked for my blessing. The detective's expression didn't change. Of course he did. That's his way. He draws people in step by step. But you saw it, didn't you? The way he watched, the way he measured. I nodded. Good, Lennox said, because this is only the beginning. He won't wait long before he makes his next move. The evening after that lunch should have been quiet. I should have gone home, poured myself a drink, and tried to convince myself I had done the right thing. Instead, I found myself pacing the living room, every creak of the floorboards carrying the weight of unanswered questions. The house felt smaller somehow, as though the walls had leaned inward. I kept replaying the video Lennox had shown me, my ex-wife's voice mixing with Daniel's. I tried to piece together the timeline, the reasons, the motives. None of it fit cleanly. When the knock came again, I didn't jump this time. I half expected it. Detective Lennox stood on the porch, his collar turned up against the evening chill. He didn't wait for an invitation before stepping inside. His eyes scanned the room once, noting the scattered glasses on the counter, the untouched dinner on the table. We need to talk, he said. I gestured toward the chair. He sat, pulled the same phone from his pocket, and placed it carefully on the table. He's clever, Lennox began. Too clever to show his hand all at once. But today gave us what we needed. His confidence is building. He thinks he's winning you over. That's when men like him make mistakes. I sank into the chair across from him. My daughter believes in him completely. She loves him. How do I tell her what I saw without destroying her? You don't, Lennox said sharply. Not yet. If you go to her now, she'll tell him, not out of malice, out of love, and he'll vanish before we can stop him. I ran a hand across my face. So what do we do? He opened the phone, swiped through a few files, then turned the screen toward me again. A different video, a different angle, and this time it wasn't a rental apartment, it was a parking garage. Grainy footage, time-stamped late at night. Daniel, Aaron, leaned against a concrete pillar, speaking to another man. The stranger wore a baseball cap pulled low, his hands moving as he spoke, quick, impatient gestures. Lennox pointed at the screen. That man's name is Victor Hale. Small-time broker with ties to bigger circles. He's been under watch for months, and now he's meeting with your daughter's fiancé. The audio was worse here, distorted by echoes and distance, but fragments bled through. Money's tied up. Trust account. She doesn't know yet. Safe is the backup. The clip ended abruptly, the camera cutting out as the two men walked out of frame. I leaned back, the chair groaning under me. They're planning something, I said. They're always planning something, Lennox replied. The trick is knowing when the plan becomes action. And right now, he's moving faster than usual, which means he's either desperate or he sees an opportunity. My stomach tightened. And my daughter is in the middle of it. Lennox's eyes didn't waver. Yes. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, and the only sound between us for a long stretch. Lennox let the silence work as if giving me room to absorb the weight of what I had just seen. Finally, I asked, "What happens if he marries her before you're ready to move? Before you have enough to stop him?" The detective folded his hands, his jaw tightening. "Then everything gets harder. The law protects marriage. Assets merge, accounts blur. By the time we untangle it, he could drain what he wants and disappear. Men like him rarely stay long enough for the ink to dry on the license." I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the dark street. The quiet suburb suddenly felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. "She won't listen if I tell her. She'll see me as the one trying to ruin her happiness." "That's exactly what he counts on," Lennox said. His voice softened, though his eyes stayed hard. "He isolates. He builds trust with the person he needs, while quietly cutting the ties around them. By the time the truth comes out, it's too late." I turned back to him. "So what do you need me to do?" "For now, keep playing the role, the supportive father, cautious but not hostile. Let him think he's winning you over. Meanwhile, we'll tighten the net." "And what if he makes a move before you're ready?" "Then I'll step in." He said it with such certainty that for a moment I almost believed it, but the image of Daniel, Aaron, standing in that parking garage, speaking so calmly about trust accounts and safes, told me otherwise. Men like that didn't wait to be caught. They anticipated, they adapted, they struck first. I sat again, my hands curling into fists against the table. "She deserves to know the truth. She deserves to be safe," Lennox countered. "And right now, safety means patience." A silence settled over the room again, heavier this time. The detective reached into his coat, withdrew a folded paper, and slid it across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Background, what little we've been able to verify. Names, addresses, inconsistencies, patterns of behavior. Study it, memorize it. The better you know who you're dealing with, the less chance he has of pulling you under." I unfolded the paper. The name Aaron Pike stared back at me in bold letters. Beneath it, Daniel Pierce. Beside that, 3 more names I didn't recognize, each attached to a different city, a different year, a different woman. At the bottom of the page, a single line was scrawled in pen, darker and fresher than the rest. "Stories hold longer than facts when people are lonely." I looked up sharply. "He said this." Lennox nodded. "And he said it before?" "Different places, different people. It's one of his tells." The words chilled me. My daughter was lonely once. After her mother left, she carried it quietly, but I knew it was there. Had he seen it? Had he sensed it, circled it, moved in like a predator on prey? I folded the paper back up, set it down, and looked the detective square in the eye. "I'll do what you ask, but if he hurts her, if she comes out of this broken—" Lennox held up a hand. "That's not going to happen." "Not if we play this right?" He stood, tucking the phone back into his coat. At the door, he paused. "He'll try again soon. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. Whatever he says, however charming he makes it sound. Remember the video? Remember the garage? And don't let him see you flinch." I locked the door behind him, then leaned against it, the paper still burning in my pocket. Upstairs, in the quiet of her old room, framed photos of a childhood filled with birthdays and Christmas mornings stared down from the walls. She had trusted me to keep her safe then. She still did now. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I could. The following day began with a call from my daughter. Her voice was cheerful, almost musical, the sound of someone whose world felt right. "Dad, I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "Yesterday meant so much to me, to us." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, searching for cracks in her tone. There were none. She was radiant, untouched by suspicion, blind to the undercurrent I had seen. "I'm glad," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "He seems devoted." "He is," she replied quickly. I know you were nervous, but I hope yesterday showed you he's serious about me. About us? I murmured something noncommittal. She didn't notice she was already talking about dinner plans, about how Daniel wanted to invite me over to their place soon, about the possibility of a holiday trip they'd been discussing. Every word wrapped her deeper in the story he was spinning. When the call ended, I stayed seated in the kitchen, staring at the phone in my hand, long after the line went dead. By mid-afternoon, the unease had sharpened into a restlessness I couldn't shake. I found myself driving without thinking, the road carrying me across town to the address Lennox had scrawled on the folded paper. It was an apartment complex, neat, orderly, anonymous. The kind of place where tenants changed every year and no one bothered to learn names. I parked across the street, watching. A figure emerged from one of the units. Daniel. He carried a briefcase in one hand, his stride confident, unhurried. He looked like any professional heading to a meeting. Nothing about him suggested the man from the video or the garage. He climbed into a sleek sedan, checked his mirror, and pulled into traffic. On instinct, I followed. The city blurred past as we wound through side streets and avenues. Finally, he turned into an underground garage beneath an office building. I parked a block away and waited. An hour passed, then 2. At last, he emerged again, this time with Victor Hale beside him, the same man from the garage video. They spoke briefly at the curb before Victor walked off in the opposite direction. Daniel remained a moment longer, scanning the street with a wary glance. His eyes passed over my parked car once, twice, but never lingered. Then he slipped behind the wheel and drove away. I waited until he was gone before stepping out of the car. My pulse hammered as I replayed what I had just seen. He wasn't hiding their connection anymore. He was moving openly, confidently. When I returned home, Lennox was already waiting on the porch, as though he had known where I'd been. You followed him, he said flatly. I didn't answer. Don't, he continued. You'll tip him off before we're ready. And if he realizes you're watching, he'll vanish. He's done it before. He met Hale again, I said, in broad daylight. He doesn't even care who sees. That's what should worry you most, Lennox replied. His expression hardened. Confidence means escalation. He's not just weaving himself into your daughter's life anymore. He's preparing the next step. I felt the weight of those words settle into me. Escalation, the next step. What do we do? I asked quietly. The detective's gaze sharpened. We wait for him to move, and when he does, we'll be ready to catch him in it. But in that moment, standing on my porch as the evening shadows stretched long, I realized something chilling. Waiting meant trusting that my daughter wouldn't be the one who paid the price. The shift began so subtly that at first I thought I was imagining it. My daughter's visits grew shorter. Her phone calls, once filled with details about her day, became clipped, rehearsed. When I asked about Daniel, she always smiled, but the words she used felt borrowed, like phrases placed in her mouth by someone else. One evening, she arrived unannounced, carrying a bag of groceries. Thought I'd cook for you, she said. Her tone was bright, but her eyes darted around the house like she was checking for something, or someone. As she worked in the kitchen, I watched her. The way she avoided certain topics, steering conversation back to safe ground. The way her shoulders stiffened when I mentioned her mother, and the way she repeated Daniel's name casually as though rehearsing his presence in every corner of her life. When dinner was ready, she set 2 plates down at the table. We ate in silence for a while before I asked, How are things between you two? She paused, fork in midair. Good. Really good. Why? No reason, I said, though my tone betrayed me. Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing across her face. You don't trust him, do you? I set my fork down carefully. I'm cautious, that's all. Cautious, she repeated, the word sharp. You were cautious yesterday, cautious last week. At some point, you'll have to decide if you're willing to give him a chance. Her defensiveness startled me. It wasn't like her to snap. I thought of Lennox's warning. He isolates. He builds trust with the one he needs while cutting the ties around them. I leaned forward. Has he said something? About me? She looked away. He just thinks you're guarded. That you might not want me to be happy if it means letting someone else in. The words cut deeper than I expected. My daughter, the girl I had raised, protected, believed in, was beginning to see me not as her anchor, but as an obstacle. Later that night, after she left, I found myself staring at the paper Lennox had given me, the list of names, the patterns. Each woman had been drawn in, convinced, reshaped until her family was no longer hers, but his. My daughter was walking the same path, and I was being pushed to the edges of it. The following morning, Lennox called. He's accelerating, the detective said without preamble. We intercepted chatter about a joint account. He's preparing to tie her finances to his. Once that happens, it becomes harder to separate. My grip tightened on the phone. She trusts him enough to agree? Not yet. But he'll find a way to convince her. He always does. I looked out the window at the quiet street, the ordinary world still moving as though nothing had changed. Then we don't have much time. No, Lennox said, we don't. The call from my daughter came late in the evening, her voice trembling with excitement. Dad, she said, Daniel wants us to start looking at houses. He thinks renting is wasting money, and he's found a place just outside the city. Big yard, plenty of space. He wants you to see it. I sat at the kitchen table, the detective's file open in front of me, names and dates staring back like warnings. So soon? I asked carefully. She laughed softly, nervously. Why wait? We know we're right for each other. He just wants to plan ahead. Plan ahead. The phrase tasted bitter. He wasn't planning ahead, he was positioning himself. When are you going? I asked. Tomorrow evening. Can you come? There was no refusing her. Yes, I said, I'll be there. The house sat on a quiet street, so its front porch sagging slightly, its shutters freshly painted to distract from the cracks in the foundation. It looked less like a home and more like a stage, dressed up just enough to sell a story. Daniel greeted us at the door with a smile so wide it could have been carved. Perfect timing, he said, ushering us inside. The rooms were empty except for a folding table and a pair of chairs in the living room, as if the house had been cleared just for this showing. He led us from room to room, speaking of possibilities. This could be a nursery someday, he said, tapping the wall of a small bedroom. My daughter blushed, her eyes downcast. And here, he continued, sweeping his hand across the kitchen, this is where we'll build our future. Meals together, holidays, family. His words painted pictures, but all I saw were the hollow walls, the staged emptiness, the way his eyes flickered toward me whenever he spoke of permanence. Finally, in the kitchen, he turned serious. I've already spoken to a broker, he said. We'd need to move quickly, but with both our names on the mortgage, it's more than possible. My daughter looked at me then, her eyes wide, silently pleading for approval. I felt the trap closing. Daniel stepped closer, his voice lowering. I want you to know, sir, that I'll take care of her. But I also want her to have stability. That means a house, a home, something that belongs to us both. The words were too smooth, too practiced. I remembered the garage footage, the whispered talk of trust accounts and safes. This wasn't about a home, it was about access. I forced a thin smile. It's a big decision. A mortgage ties you together more than anything else. Exactly, Daniel said quickly, seizing the point. That's the idea. To show we're committed. My daughter squeezed his hand, her face glowing with trust. I swallowed the words I wanted to speak, the warnings that threatened to spill out. Because in that moment I realized that if I pushed too hard, I wouldn't just lose the argument. I might lose her entirely. That night, after returning from the house, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights off, listening to the clock tick. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, smiling, patient, waiting for me to nod, waiting for me to give away the last piece of ground between us. Near midnight, I picked up the phone and called Lennox. He answered on the second ring. "You went to the house," he said, not a question. "Yes." "And?" "He wants a mortgage. Joint names. My daughter thinks it's about starting a family, but it isn't, is it?" I could hear him exhale on the other end. "No, it's about control. Once her name is tied to his on paper, he can leverage it, loans, equity, collateral. She won't see the consequences until it's too late. By then, untangling it will be a nightmare." I rubbed my eyes. "So what do we do?" "We let him keep believing he's in control," Lennox said. "But this is the window. He's moving faster than before, which means he's showing his hand. If we're careful, we can catch him before the papers are signed." "And if we're not careful?" "Then he locks her in, and we spend the next year trying to prove fraud after the fact." The silence stretched long between us. My chest ached with the weight of it. I can't just sit here and watch him do this to her. "You won't," Lennox said firmly. "Tomorrow, I'll have my partner pull records on the broker he mentioned. If he's working through his usual channels, there will be a pattern. People like him don't invent new tricks. They recycle the old ones." I stared out the window, the neighborhood asleep, and the street lamps spilling their pale light across the empty road. "And my daughter? She's falling deeper every day. She's already defending him against me." "That's what he wants," Lennox said. "If she sees you as the enemy, she'll cling to him harder. So don't confront her. Don't tell her what you know. Trust me to do the digging." His words carried weight, but they didn't lift the burden. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe the law could protect her. But the image of Daniel in that bare kitchen, speaking of nurseries and holidays, told me otherwise. When I finally hung up, the house felt colder than it had in years. Upstairs in the spare room where my daughter's childhood trophies still lined the shelves, a photo sat on the dresser. Her first day of school, her hand clutching mine. She had trusted me then without hesitation. Now she trusted a stranger more than her own father. I stood there in the dark, staring at that photo, and made a silent promise. If Lennox's net failed, I would find another way. Whatever it took, I would not let Daniel Pierce, Aaron Pike, or whatever his name truly was, steal my daughter's life. The following week unfolded like a slow tightening of rope. My daughter's calls came less often, and when she did speak, Daniel's voice sometimes floated faintly in the background, directing, correcting, reminding her of something. She no longer spoke freely. Each sentence felt measured, trimmed, as if she were afraid of saying too much. By Friday afternoon, Lennox appeared at my door again. He looked more tired than before, the lines around his eyes deeper. He carried a folder tucked under one arm, thick with papers. "We have something," he said the moment he stepped inside. "The broker he mentioned, the one arranging the mortgage, is a shell. The company doesn't exist. It's a front tied to Hale. Every file points back to him. This isn't about a house, it's a pipeline. They're setting up a structure to move money, and your daughter is the key that unlocks it." My throat tightened. "She has no idea." "No," Lennox agreed, "and that's how he keeps it working. He makes her believe she's building a future while he's using her name to open doors he couldn't touch alone." He opened the folder, spreading papers across my kitchen table. Loan documents, property deeds, wire transfers, all linked by the same subtle fingerprints. Different names, different cities, but the pattern was unmistakable. "Every woman in this file," Lennox said quietly, "looked at him the way your daughter does now. Every one of them believed. By the time they realized the truth, he was gone." I sat down heavily, my hands pressed flat against the table. "So what happens now?" "Now," Lennox said, We move. We've been waiting for him to overreach, and this is it. The house, the mortgage, the broker. It's sloppy compared to his usual work. He's moving too fast. Maybe because he's confident, maybe because he knows we're watching. Either way, it's our chance. He leaned forward, his eyes steady. But I need you there. Tomorrow, he's taking her to sign the first set of papers. We'll intercept before it happens, but he won't expect resistance from you. He'll expect compliance. That's what makes this work. I swallowed hard. And if he fights back, Lennox's expression didn't change. Then we make sure he doesn't walk away. The next morning, I found myself in a bland office building on the edge of town, the kind with beige walls, buzzing lights, and a lobby that smelled faintly of disinfectant. My daughter walked in beside Daniel, her hand looped through his arm, her face glowing with trust. When she saw me already seated in the lobby, her eyes widened. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I forced a calm smile. Thought I'd come along. It's an important day. Daniel's jaw tightened for the briefest second before he masked it with a grin. "Of course," he said smoothly. "The more the merrier." We followed the receptionist down a hallway into a glass-walled conference room. Papers waited neatly stacked on the table, pens lined up beside them. Daniel guided her to a chair, his hand lingering protectively on her shoulder. Lennox appeared at the door then, flanked by another man in plain clothes. His badge flashed once before disappearing into his coat. "Mr. Pierce?" he said evenly. Or should I say Pike? Daniel's smile faltered. His hand froze halfway to the stack of papers. My daughter looked from Lennox to me, confusion and dawning fear rising in her eyes. "Daniel," she whispered, "what's going on?" He straightened slowly, his face smoothing into calm. "Nothing, love. Just a misunderstanding." But I saw it, the flicker in his eyes, the calculation, the recognition that the story he had built was crumbling around him. The room seemed to contract. As Lennox stepped fully inside, his partner closing the door behind him, the hum of the fluorescent lights pressed against the silence. Daniel's eyes flicked from the detective to the folder of documents on the table, then back to me. His smile returned, thin and careful. "This is unnecessary," he said smoothly. "I don't know what you think you've found, but—" Lennox cut him off. "Save it. We've tracked you across 3 states, different names, different women, the same game every time. You worm your way into a family, secure financial access, and vanish before the pieces are put together." My daughter's breath caught. She looked at Daniel, her face pale. What is he talking about?" Daniel leaned toward her, voice soft, intimate. "Nothing, love. He's mistaken. They're trying to scare you. That's what they do, make fathers paranoid, turn them against the men their daughters choose." Her eyes darted to me, searching. For the first time, doubt shimmered there. Lennox dropped a stack of papers onto the table. They fanned out, photographs clipped to documents, signatures on contracts that bore different names but the same handwriting. Aaron Pike, Matthew Cross, Daniel Pierce. Take your pick. Same man, same trail of ruined accounts and broken promises. Daniel's jaw tightened. For a flicker of a moment, the polished mask cracked, revealing steel beneath. Then it smoothed again, his tone syruped with calm. "These are fabrications. Anyone can put a file together." I pushed back my chair and stood. "I saw the video," I said, my voice low, steady. "You with her?" "My ex-wife, talking about safes, codes, access. Don't lie to me." My daughter's hand flew to her mouth. "Mom," she whispered. Daniel's charm faltered again. He turned to her, urgency sharpening his tone. "Listen to me. Yes, I met her, but only because I wanted her blessing. I wanted her to know I was serious about us." But even as he spoke, the words sounded hollow, rehearsed. The same cadence he had used at the restaurant, the same rhythm of persuasion. Lennox stepped closer, his badge flashing again. It's over. The broker, the shell company, the fake mortgage. You've run out of stories to hide behind. Daniel's eyes hardened, his calm slipping. You don't understand, he hissed. This isn't about money. It's about survival. He reached for the papers on the table, but Lennox's partner moved fast, pinning his wrist down with a sharp crack against the wood. Daniel jerked, tried to pull free, but the fight was brief. Within seconds, his arms were wrenched behind his back, cuffs locking around his wrists. My daughter sat frozen, her eyes wide, her body rigid in the chair. Daniel, she whispered, tell me this isn't true. He twisted once against the cuffs, then stilled. His voice dropped low, almost tender, even as they held him. I wanted us to be different, he said to her, but your father never trusted me. He ruined it before it could begin. Enough? Lennox snapped, hauling him upright. The door swung open and Daniel was marched out into the hallway, his voice echoing once before fading down the corridor. Silence fell in the room, heavy and final. My daughter's eyes brimmed with tears as she turned to me. Dad, she said, her voice breaking, what just happened? Who was I about to marry? I had no answer that would soften the truth. For a long moment after the door closed, the only sound in the room was the faint buzz of the overhead lights. My daughter sat rigid, her hands clutched together so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Lennox gathered the scattered papers from the table and slid them back into his folder. His voice, when he finally spoke, was steady but not unkind. You need to know this wasn't about you. Not really. It was about what you gave him access to. He's done this before, and he would have done it again. You were a step in his plan. She shook her head, her eyes glassy. No. He loved me. I saw it. I felt it. Lennox's gaze softened. He's good at making people believe that. It's his talent, but none of it was real. He chose you because of who you are, because of the family you come from. That's the truth. Whether it feels like it or not. Her breath caught and she looked at me, her face filled with hurt and disbelief. Did you know? How long? I sat beside her, my hand resting lightly on the table between us. Since before the lunch, the detective showed me things I couldn't ignore. I wanted to protect you, but if I'd told you, you wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought I was trying to stand in your way. Tears slid down her cheeks, and she turned away, burying her face in her hands. How could I have been so blind? I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that trust isn't blindness, that it's the most human thing we give to each other. Instead, I reached out and touched her shoulder. He fooled everyone before you, too. It wasn't you, it was him. Lennox closed the folder with a quiet snap. We'll need statements, he said, but not tonight. Tonight, she needs to go home, to be with someone who can remind her what's real. I nodded. The drive back was silent, broken only by her soft, uneven breaths. When we reached the house, she didn't move at first, just stared out the window, as though the world outside was foreign. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you for not letting him take everything from me." I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. Always? She leaned against me then, her head on my shoulder, the same way she had as a child, after nightmares. And in that quiet, I realized that though this day had shattered the world she thought she knew, it had also reminded us both of something deeper. Trust can be broken, but it can also be rebuilt. As I locked the door behind us, the memory of the morning came rushing back. The shirt I had ironed, the careful preparation, the thought that today would be about beginnings. Instead, it had been about endings. And though the detective's warning still echoed in my mind, I knew one truth with certainty. Daniel, Aaron, whatever his name was, would never take another step inside my daughter's life again. The day I thought I was meeting my daughter's fiancé became the day I watched her world unravel, and it changed everything.